Let's just cut to the chase. No one likes long intros. What if Ben and Gwen weren't related? Episode 1. We start our series deviating from how episode 1 starts out, as our 10-year-old protagonist is shown packing for the upcoming trip with his grandfather. Excited to be heading on out. His mother walks in and asks if he is excited, to which Ben then exclaims, "A whole summer road trip with Grandpa? What's not to be excited for?" He actually gets to skip the last day of school, and so was making sure that he had everything packed, doing a final once-over at his mother's suggestion. Grandpa Max is shown pulling the rust bucket up to the front of Ben's home and parking, honking to let him know that it's time to go. Excitedly, Ben rushes out, telling his mom bye as he jumped into the camper ready to head on off. Max then begins to drive off as we cut to inside the camper, where Ben takes notice of someone sitting at the table inside the RV looking bored and annoyed. Ben looks annoyed seeing the girl. She had long red hair tied back into a ponytail and distinctly blue eyes. He then questioned, "What are you doing here?" The girl remarks, "My parents are on business trips and they asked if I could go on the trip because my brother is too busy with studies." We then see Grandpa Max turn back to the two of them and state, "Come on, your dads were like brothers as kids. You two should learn to get along. This trip could be a good bonding experience." Little did he know just how right that statement was. We then fade to them at the first campsite, where Max sets down a bowl of marinated mealworms. Rather than sticking around to try them, Ben decides he'd rather go for a walk, stating that he wasn't all that hungry. While wandering the woods around the campsite, Ben hears something and looks towards where it's coming from, seeing what he thinks is a shooting star, only for it to change directions and come crashing down in front of him. Thinking that this sorta looked cool, Ben then tried to take a closer look, with the ground giving way under him, making him slide into the crater that had been created in front of him, actually bumping his head against the metal when he did so. This caused the sphere to open, as he then stood up with one hand on his head as he looked inside confused, and utters, "Is that a watch? What's that doing in outer space?" Reaching towards it, the device attached itself to his wrist, which freaked Ben out, making him climb his way out of the crater and call out for his grandpa. Tripping over a stick, Ben decides, "Hey, I can use that to try to pry this thing off." Though sadly it breaks while doing so, making him pout and sit down, not sure what he was going to tell his grandfather. He then starts to mess with the device, making the dial pop up and show a black shape on it that looked sort of like a dog. Deciding to turn the dial more, the shape changes to that of a big pointy buff guy. Then what looked sort of like a ghost, and after that some weird person with what looked like flaming hair, before then saying, "This is weird," before pushing down the dial with his finger, giving us our first transformation. Ben does freak out about being on fire before calming down and realizing it doesn't burn or anything, and decides to start playing with this new form to see what it could do, accidentally starting a forest fire in the process. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Grandpa Max and Gwen take notice of the smoke coming from the forest. Remembering Ben was out there, Max hands Gwen a fire extinguisher and they run off to put out the flames. Gwen does come across Ben like in the show and freaks out, blasting him with the extinguisher, making him cough out the foam. He then complains and warns her not to try it again, calling her a freak. This made Gwen realize that was Ben. Max then appears looking surprised, but had heard Gwen mentioning Ben and asking what happened. He assumed rightfully that this flaming guy had something to do with it. Ben tells Grandpa it's him, and Gwen points out they need to put out the flames, so Max suggests creating a backfire. After putting out the flames, they then headed off to the crash site with Ben explaining what happened on the way. Seeing the sphere, Max suggests taking it with them just in case, and so begins to haul it back to the rust bucket. After putting the sphere in storage, Gwen asks if Ben is going to stay a monster forever. To which Max corrects that he is an alien, and the two look confused at him before he says, "Well, look at him!" before telling Ben not to worry because they would figure out what's going on. It's then that the watch times out and he turns back into Ben. Max suggests helping Ben learn more about the watch, and Ben excitedly agrees before they get a distress call on the radio about a robot attacking a nearby campsite. Ben says that they need to help, and Max agrees as they go off to the site. Ben then activates the watch and turns the dial. We see a dinosaur-looking thing, some weird humanoid thing with a big head, and the image of the big pointy buff guy. Remembering them from earlier, Ben decides to give that one a go and hits down the watch, changing into a living humanoid crystal thing. He then runs off to go fight the robot. Ben tells Grandpa Max and Gwen to get the other campers to safety while he fights the robot. Getting the robot's attention by punching it in the leg, it then scans Ben, taking note of the symbol on his left pectoral before blasting him into a nearby camper trailer. It's then Ben cuts his way out before taking note of the fact he can create sharp crystals and wonders if he can fire them like that fire guy could with the flames. The projectiles jab into the robot, one of them clogging the blaster on its left arm, making it explode. The robot fires a blast from its remaining arm, and when Ben puts out his arm, it bounces off and hits a tree, giving him an idea. Taunting the robot, he tells it to aim right for his chest, smirking. When the robot does just that, he then makes a bunch of crystals on his arms, combining them and closing them inwards, giving the ray no place to go but back towards the robot's head, blasting it and its chest with its own beam and causing the robot to explode. Both Gwen and Grandpa Max cheer from the sidelines, with Max excitedly calling out, "Way to go, diamond-headed guy!" before the three of them run off so that no one has time to ask any questions. We then cut to Ben, riding in the rust bucket and smirking, sitting backwards in a chair, stating, "This is gonna be the best summer ever."